Guldfest hela dagen. Mjöl från livets grottekvarn. Guldfest hela dagen.
Hello, I'm Alice from Alice & Co Patterns, and thank you to the Fold Line for inviting me again to give a little talk. And what I've decided to do today is to introduce you to my collection of sewing machines through the ages. I work with my daughter Lilia, and she works at the Victoria and Albert Museum, so we're particularly interested in looking at fashion history and using fashion history to inspire our designs of today. And what better way to do it than looking at some vintage sewing machines. So I'm going to show you 4 from 1886 through to the present day and give you some ideas about different things that could be made with them. So this is our first machine, and she's from the Singer Sewing Machine Company, and she's really quite a beauty with a very beautifully, elaborately gold decorated arm across here, and all this metal plate here is also very nicely decorated. And a sewing machine in 1886, when this one was patented, was really still an expensive and special thing, and only rich households or people working as seamstresses would have had one. And this one, I know its provenance. This one belonged to a Miss Mould who lived or worked on London's Edgware Road at number 484, and she bought the sewing machine in 1886. This is the receipt. And she paid, the sewing machine was £6, but she traded in an old sewing machine, and so she paid £4 and 15 shillings for this beauty. And I have a kind of fantasy about Miss Mould, that she was a seamstress and made clothes for the ladies of Mayfair. And I used to have a made-to-measure business, and my very first studio was just behind Selfridges, really quite near to Edgware Road, and where Miss Mould had her workshop. So I like to think of her as a precursor of Alice & Co, making beautiful clothes. And the sewing machine is it's a hand crank sewing machine. So it's got this little bullet shaped shuttle here, which is a little bit of a fiddle to get in, but let me have a go. That's it. And then tension right there, that's it. Probably needs a bit of oil on there. And then you can pull the thread through. So here's the shuttle here that's like a little bullet shape, and the needle has the thread going in from the side to the middle, not front to back like modern machines. Otherwise it looks pretty much the same. That's the little shuttle cover here. Just put that in. Go, and then I'll dry her out. I love the sound of this one. And I think you can just go forward on here, and I think you have to turn it around to go backwards. So this is the sort of thing Miss Mould might have been making. It's a very simple sewing machine, as you saw, that just goes forwards only, but there's very kind of elaborate clothing is what she might have been making with it, and it would have saved her a lot of time on hand sewing, even though it only went forwards. So this one is an evening dress which was made by Phoenix of New Bond Street, which is still in operation today. Possibly Miss Mould made for Phoenix, who knows. And these are all the pieces that went into making that dress. As you can see, it's really quite elaborate, and there's quite a lot of internal bones and little ribbons to hold the boning in place. And this comes from a rather beautiful series of books called The Patterns of Fashion by Janet Arnold, which are from the School of Historical Dress, which is a lovely little fashion museum down in South London, just south of the river. But we will put the descriptions at the end, so you can have another look at the books if you'd like to know more about them. So this is an old photograph of some of my family dressed in similar period costume with great big sleeves, as you can see there. And this young one here is actually called Alice, same as me, and she looks rather grumpy.
Klappat hakten alla Mullfest hela dagen. Lite mjöl från livets grottekvarn. Mullfest hela dagen. Små på stort, det har vi alltid gjort, så det är mullfest.
So this is our next sewing machine, and it's made in 1939, and it's made by Vickers, who were a company who made all sorts of machinery. And you can see it's not very different from the last one we were looking at, so nothing has really changed too much. We still have the hand crank, and we've still got our bullet-shaped shuttle and a little tiny spool. You're not going to get too much thread on there, which gets wound on here and put into the shuttle that goes backwards and forwards here. And it comes with this rather nice bright graphics, which has got some interesting bit of red colouring in there, which explains, that's really all the explanation you get of how the sewing machine works. And in my imagination, this sewing machine was owned by Betty, and Betty is going to sew herself a nice pair of French knickers from this pattern to cheer herself up, because her husband is off in the war and he is flying a Hurricane aeroplane, which is made by Vickers, so she's hoping that the plane is as well put together as the sewing machine. And on this pattern, it says, be warned, professional dressmakers, that if you're making this garment for sale, be very aware that there are fabric restrictions, because you're only allowed to use a certain amount of fabric for anything that you're going to make. But poor Betty hasn't got very much fabric. She's just got this little piece of nice silk crepe de chine left over from making her daughter's party dress, so she hasn't got enough for a slip, but I think she just has a nice piece enough to make herself a pair of French knickers. So let's see how she makes them. So here's the pattern, very rudimentary, no markings on it whatsoever, one notch to show you how to put the side seams together. Otherwise, very, very scant instructions, so no grain line, nothing to tell you what the seam allowances is, nothing at all. It was expected that you would learn how to sew at school. So let's have a go at stitching up Betty's French knickers. I decided to use pink thread for a little joie de vivre. So the sewing machine is not very different to the first one, and it has this bullet-shaped shuttle and a very small bobbin here that's not going to take too much thread, and to load it, it pokes down there, and then this slots down to the bottom, I hope, and that's it, and then it pulls up. You can hear it click, and then it pulls up through the middle here, and then gets put into the little shuttle holder here. Bit of a fiddle, but there it goes. And then you have to pull the thread up. The needle threads from the side with some difficulty. The hole's very small, and then the thread should come up through here. That's it. And unfortunately, I've lost this little piece of the shuttle cover, but maybe I can look online and find one. There do seem to be a few people selling old sewing machine parts. And then I can have a go on this piece of calico at the stitching. So I've got a forward and a reverse here. So forwards is down, reverse is back. And I'm just going to go forward. Listen to that sound. And then I'm going to try going backwards, finish off my seam. And you can actually see the shuttle going backwards and forwards as the cover's missing. And she whirs nicely. quite a little stitch. So we'll have a go now at the real thing. We'll have a go at our Vickers knickers. And I'm going to just see if it likes sewing on the crepe de chine fabric. And this machine could probably do with a little TLC and some oil, but it's not too bad. I think Betty would actually have made a French seam. I'm sure she was a careful sewer. And there we go. A bit wobbly at the beginning, but a perfect inside leg seam.
Alla armar, fullfest helt van. Mjöl från livets klockkvarn. Fullfest hela dagen. Stort på stort, det har vi alltid gjort, så det.
So this next machine is Elna, little orphan Elna, as I found her in the street. And she's from 1962. And she's all made of metal, but she's absolutely beautifully made, so everything all clips up to make her very compact. So she'd be the perfect first machine for somebody living in their own little flat. And I found her in the street, which is wonderful find because I'd have a friend who has exactly the same machine that I'd always admired. And then I found one in the shop when I took my machine to be serviced. But it was £350 and I thought, oh, I can't really justify that, so I didn't buy it. And then I found this one on the street and it had its foot pedal there, everything was intact, just a little bit of a mist wound bobbin and needing a nice drink of oil. But she's beautifully made, she's made in 1962, she's all metal parts, and I think she's going to be good for a good another 50 years. So, in my imagination, this machine belonged to Lizzie, and she was given it, much to her great delight and surprise, as a 16th birthday present from her parents, because she'd shown a great interest in sewing and clothes and making things, and she was very keen to make a Mary Quant style dress. So after practicing a little bit on her mother's old sheets and tablecloths, she saved up her pocket money and went to Liberty's and bought a lovely piece of fabric and made herself a little 1960s shift dress, and off she went to Carnaby Street and waltzed up and down with her friends and had a wonderful time showing off her new frock. Oh, listen to that purr. She has a very throaty purr for such a small machine. And a very nice stitch, and this one goes forwards and backwards, and also has quite a nice variety of different zigzag stitches. Whoops, backward zigzag. And forward zigzags of various various kinds, which can go on different settings as well. And I actually use this machine quite a lot because there's something about the quality of the metal and of the sound of it that's actually very nice. It's rather delicate with a very fine little foot, so I don't use it on thick materials, but on anything thin it's actually very nice to sew with. As a child of the 60s, I love these little kind of neat shift dress designs, and my mother used to make me lots like that. So I thought I might rediscover that period of my life this summer with some bright orange vintage fabric, which I definitely will be making up on this machine. And here she is, all packed up and ready to go. You can take her on holiday.
Magra och tjocka, ska ha det bra, ja. Klappa takten alla var. Fullfest hela dagen. Mjöl från livets grottekvarn. Fullfest hela dagen.
So to bring us right up to the present day, this is my fourth machine, and this is my Juki overlocker. I have a Juki flat machine as well, but this one is great for overlocking edges of things, which is very quick and much quicker than a zigzag, but really comes into its own for making jersey things, because you can get that nice stretchy seam and which doesn't break. And this one also has a little lever that you can pull, so you can get a nice finished edge as well on a jersey fabric. So nightmare when they go wrong and you get all the threads in a muddle, but once you've got them threaded nicely, they are very nice, quick and easy way to sew. So I'm going to be stitching up these jersey trousers for my daughter Lilia. She's very lucky, and I don't usually do tacking, but I did want to pattern match here. It is one of the things I'm fussy about. So I have tacked these together just to keep the stripes in order. And I'm just going to now whip down here. And you'll see how nice and quick this is. It makes me feel like I'm in a factory. And you do get a nice stitch with some stretch in it. Here's the design of what they're going to look like when they're finished. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of nifty pattern matching needed there. So that just about winds up my little tour of my sewing machines, and it does give a little history, I think, of 120 years of design, from the very fanciful florid singer here with all its gold ornate decoration, through to the very functional all plastic Juki with the very square simple lettering there, via our slightly space age everything clipped up together little Elna, and the rather functional solid looking wartime Vickers here. And people sometimes ask me, say, I've got an old sewing machine, is it worth anything? Would a museum like it? And the answer is no, not really, because there's an awful lot of them around still. And one of the reasons is that sewing machines were very well made, especially the metal ones, and they either work or they don't. And if they work, they keep going. So I suggest you keep them and try and make some designs that are appropriate to the era of your sewing machine. I'm Alice from Alice & Co Patterns, and thank you for joining me today.
Takten alla var. Fullfest hela dagen. Mjöl från livets grottekvarn. Fullfest hela dagen. Skor på skor, det har vi alla.